In this lesson, we're going to look at more light settings as well as adding a background which is going to create some reflections on this facade. Now I'm going to start first of all by going to my XREF Scene Manager, and I'm going to hide the first facade and reveal the second one, just so that we can have a different facade to look at while we do our render settings, just in case there are different reactions to the facade as we go from facade 1 to facade 2. Now remember as well that this facade that we bring in has still got that animation keyed into it. So all of those settings are still active that we have created when we actually did this model in the first place. So I'm going to leave it open for now. We can change it in another render later on. But let's go as well into our top view and just click on Shift F so that we can see more of our scene, and I'm going to move the sun so that it is slightly more pointing at the facade itself. So I've moved it by a few degrees, and I think we can also maybe lower it, and this will of course be trial and error once again as usual. So here I'm almost breaking that rule that I set earlier by saying this should be 90 degrees or more, but if I do put the sun too close to the facade, it is going to start projecting those very long shadows that I don't want. So that is almost the smallest angle that would really be usable. So perhaps that is about 75, 80 degrees, who knows. So at this point already I can do another test render, but just before I do, I wanted to show you how we can create a interesting background reflection object as a substitution or as another way instead of using an HDRI or an image-based reflection. So to do that, I can do it on the same layer that we have our lights and our cameras, and start by creating an arc rather. So create an arc across your entire scene so that it's sitting behind your camera, and this arc can then be extruded upwards. So EXT, and extrude it quite high up, so perhaps 50 meters, perhaps it needs to go even higher. You'll have to see when you render that you don't see the reflection of the top of this. So I'm going to make it 75 meters. I don't need so much detail on it, so I can reduce the interpolation back down to about 4 so that I don't have that many polys on it. And I'm going to create a material now with a photo that I've taken from a city that I've been to. So you can go and create a new material. It can be V-Ray as well, so V-Ray material, and that's going to be called City simply. And into the diffuse, you can add a bitmap that is going to be this city background that you have in your texture folder. So add that, and then this will be dropped onto that new object that we've just made. So I'm going to isolate it. And let's go and view that texture on the object. And here you don't necessarily have to get the aspect ratio perfect since it is just a reflection, but let's do it just to be proper about it. So UV enter, that's going to add a UV map. It's going to be in a different dimension, so it'll be on the Y, and I'm going to use bitmap for fit again, double click on city, and then just scale up within my scene so that I can get that texture in there. So all I want is for the ground to be visible and for there to be enough height so that I don't see the top of this object reflecting in my windows. So now if I go into my camera by pressing C, I can click on the keyboard Shift F, and that's going to bring me back to my original aspect ratio. So this is the point where I'm going to now render, so I will do it as I did before, where I pause the video and then I will show you the result and we can talk about what to do from there on. So now our image has been rendered out, and one of the things that you'll see is that there is this huge shadow on our building, and this is actually being cast by our actual background arc that we've extruded, our background object, basically our reflection object. So that is one thing that we're going to fix in the next step. As well, one of the things that I can see is that with the balconies being so deep, I'm not really seeing enough of the glass. So this tells me that I want to bring my camera slightly higher, so it's not going to be a human eye level anymore. It's rather going to be a frontal view so that I can catch more of the actual glass facade which is reflecting the background. But already what I do like is that I can start seeing the city background being reflected in these glassy areas, so I get some depth of the street and all these things that are happening behind my back, behind the camera, or at least the viewer's back. So those things are positive, and there are a few more light settings that we're going to change. So the first thing, let's just go back into our top view, and I'm repeating the same process by going in and out of the different views. And I'm going to select the arc object that we've just created, and I'm going to right click and go into object properties. There I'm going to deselect cast shadows. And what that'll do is that it'll stop that large shadow from being cast on the facade of this building. So right now you can see that the sun was actually being, or that this object was blocking the view or the light that was busy shining on the building. Also, I'm going to raise my sun slightly since I want to get just a brighter sun effect. So that I'm busy increasing, and I also know that the sun will become brighter the higher it goes. Then in terms of my camera, if I look in my side view, I'm going to raise my camera so it is sitting at about floor 4 or 5. Then I click on C on my keyboard, and I'm going to first start off by clicking Guess Vertical and Shift F so that I can see the entire facade. There I can now go into my target and then just lower it slightly. And back in my camera, I see that I need to increase the angle so that I can capture more of the facade. And then just before I'm done, I need to click Guess Vertical one more time, and then once again just keep on retweaking the exact position of where the target should be. So now I'm ready for another test shot, so I'm going to hit render again and pause again, and then we're going to come back in a minute and speak about what effect we have created. I'm also going to close these shutters slightly so we can see those two different options as well. So here is our rendered version of what we've done so far, and already if I zoom in, I can see that there is quite decent differentiation between the lit up zones and the shadows. I can see that the shadows are quite light. They don't pose too much of a problem to the facade. There isn't too much contrast. I can see through them nicely. And I can also look at the edge of this floor slab, so I'm getting decent viewing angle to be able to look at the full face of this glass facade. Also, I can see that there are some decent reflections happening on this lower facade. Perhaps the glass is too reflective. And also I can see that there is enough definition happening between these white shutters in the background. So in general, this is a pretty good start to get the general lighting finished for our draft render stage. What we're going to do now in the next lesson, or in the next step, is that we're going to take the render settings and increase them back up to a slightly higher level, and then we're going to render out the 3 different facades and then bring that information across into Photoshop just for a final touch-up before we complete this course. So what we've covered in this one has just been more render settings. We've looked at the different light and camera angles that we've adjusted earlier, and we've basically tweaked that background to not be casting a big shadow on the building. So hang around for the last lesson or two as we wrap up these 3 facades.